Everybody on page 88, if you would just indulge me in a couple of paragraphs there and make sure to read it. Gordon Logan, also one of the pillars of cognitive psychology, and Joseph Etherton, sought to tie together many of the concepts we've talked about, and they propose an attention hypothesis of automatization. So in other words, how quickly tasks can be done with practice. And basically it says that attention is needed during practice phase of a task and determine what gets learned during practice. Attention also determines what will be remembered from the practice. So Logan put it this way in 96, learning is a side effect of attending. People will learn the things that they attend to and will not learn the things that they don't. And Logan argued that attention affects when information gets encoded, kind of like that apple picking that we referred to in another chapter. So essentially, one of their take-home messages is that paying no attention to something that's a distractor makes it easier to ignore it later. And they had a clever experiment that I think is one of the more understandable experiments in the whole chapter. They colored irrelevant words when people were performing a task to pay attention to a relevant word, and participants recalled less about those colored words later. So in other words, if I can formally demarcate what's irrelevant, it enables me to pay more attention to something that is relevant, and I tend to process it less. On the other hand, when the words were not colored, they tend to enjoy greater absorption even though they were irrelevant. So demarking them as colored, in green I think was the color in the experiment, in that case it had the effect of making it easier to ignoring them, and also making sure they weren't absorbed at all for a later task. On the other hand, if they were in the same font and the same color, they tend to be peripherally absorbed, even though we didn't intend to use them for that task at that point. So that's part of this idea of automatization. Hard word to say. The easier word to say is automaticity. Now, where can this idea of a practiced phenomenon be most efficiently observed? It's in a Stroop task. Now, you've seen the Stroop task before, and I'll just, of course, give you a little preview here. In the circumstance where the word meaning and the font are not congruent, it becomes very hard to name the color of the font. So this is the case for each of these 12 words. I'm going horizontally: blue, orange, red, gray, red, green, purple, blue, yellow, green, blue, red. Now the problem is, what makes it so difficult is the word meaning is overlearned. I cannot resist reading the word. That's something that we've done since we were toddlers. We've been taught to read words. The less practiced thing to do, of course, is naming the color of the font. It's not very difficult to do in isolation, but it's difficult to do when I have to overcome the more learned process, and that's this idea of automaticity. Basically, it's so strongly learned that it can't be suppressed, and it jumps up and interferes with the task at hand, which is naming the color of the font. So it provides a meaningful perspective on why that is the case, that the Stroop effect exists. Now, it's interesting, trivia. There have been so many researchers that we've cited that lived to advanced ages and did great things. Logan was one. I just Googled Ann Treisman. I didn't know she passed away. It's February 9th, right around the time that I'm recording this, 2018. So, kind of a coincidence. But J.R. Stroop, not much is known about him. He published very little, and I believe this is only one of 4 articles that he ever published. And it's one of the most cited in all of psychological research because it lends itself to so many tasks. It's kind of a clever notion. So anyway, it's an example of extreme automatic processing where something can't be suppressed, which is often used with this word automaticity, in which one task gets in the way of another. In this case, the really, really overlearned task gets in the way of the less learned task of naming the color of the font.